Donovan, thank you so much for your text. My son will be reaching out. He's been sick. So, but thank you so much. And thank you for the phenomenal review. I do appreciate it. And if you look on my LinkedIn page, you'll see that the gentleman has shared a quote by Booker T about the Negro staying in their place. So rather interesting. I'm just saying. I'm getting in good trouble in Jacksonville. Are you guys ready for this dynamic conversation today? It's going to be so good.
This will be awesome, incredible.
Yeah, I know. I was looking up the pay disparities and all that stuff. So it's good. Got all the data. We're good to go.
So, Dr. Tammy, would you be sharing any information on the screen or talking to the information?
Just talking to the information.
Okay. All right, great.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
because I think it's pretty well known, but I think it's important to put it in context.
Right.
You know, the different level of income, just the continued issue with pay disparities. So like typically I think we celebrate in, is it April, that it would take an African American woman up until April the following year to have made what European male made, who's in that same position. So yeah, just kind of talking about that.
Great.
So, and then yeah, just sharing that data. Hello, Michael.
Good morning, Tammy. How you doing, my friend? Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I'm doing good. How are you?
It's been a minute. It's been a minute, but good to see you.
I know. Good to see you too.
Thank you so much. You have been a blessing for COMTO Jacksonville.
Oh, you know, these my people. I claim them, so it just makes perfect sense. And then I see Denver got all that snow. My brother posted pictures, which I didn't know they made Uggs in a size 17, but apparently they do. As he was out there shoveling the snow.
Wow.
And Miss Deborah Johnson, I just sent you a request to unmute yourself if you want to make a comment.
Oh my goodness, yes, good morning, everybody. It's horrible.
Good morning.
Walked in the snow this morning.
The pictures Miss Johnson, my brother posted, I was like, OMG, is it ever going to stop snowing there?
I know. I mean, I had to suspend transit service on Sunday at 7. We got over 50 buses stuck, our tracks, the switches were frozen. It was horrendous. And we just started service yesterday. Was yesterday Tuesday?
Yes. But we all kind of had to go back, right?
Yeah, but and it's snowing again.
And I'll be there April 10th through the 14th.
Oh, really?
So yeah, maybe you and I'll reach out to you. Maybe we could get a coffee or something, because yeah, I'll be there. We're gonna come visit them. We try to come at least once a year.
Yeah, reach out. That'll be great. Hopefully it won't be snowing.
I know, right? Well, you know, I'm from Wisconsin, so I'd be rolling in the snow anyway. So.
Not this California girl.
And meanwhile, it's 84 degrees in Jacksonville.
I don't even want to hear it.
And Ida, why did you have to say that? On Wednesdays, I do a 4-mile run with my run group, and then we do yoga. It was 66 degrees at 5:15 this morning. Wow. I was like, see, I'm missing the cooler weather. Because I like it when it's cool when I run versus, you know.
Yep. I get that.
So I felt like I was doing hot yoga. And I wasn't paying extra for it. So I guess it was.
Hopefully, Jolly will be on soon.
And Miss, is it LeGrand? Is that how I say her last name?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I just want to make sure because I want to make sure I pronounce because my last name is Hodo and they will jack that up every time. So make sure I get people's stuff right.
Chris, have you unmuted Adelaide?
Hello, I'm here.
Yeah,
Can you
we
hear
can
me?
hear.
Okay.
Hi, Ali.
Hello. I was wrapping up another call. My apologies for that. Yes, I have on green too. See, Ida, I followed your guidance and you don't have on green.
I didn't have anything and I forgot to
Uh-uh.
buy something. My bad.
Hello, Chair Jolly, and our welcome to our CEO guests, Adelaide LeGrand and Deborah Johnson. How are you all?
Hi, Cleveland. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Director Jolly, Chair Jolly, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Nice to be with everyone this morning.
Good to be with you.
Good morning.
Great to have you.
Thank you. I have two dogs here, and from time to time, they feel the need to participate in the conversation. So I will apologize in advance for any disruption they may cause.
So I have a big, beautiful, robust black lab downstairs. So let me go ahead and, and apologize for him too, because he likes to engage as well sometimes. And when I say robust, it's because I don't want to body shame him. So the vet has already talked about his low hanging belly. And I said, really? I mean, we're doing this with dogs too. So he's just well taken care of.
Deborah, it's good seeing you. It's been a while.
I know. How's everything going?
It's going. It's going. What about you?
Girl, we need to talk. Let's talk.
I know.
Seriously, let's try and catch up because we said that via email or text.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
For real. Oh, that's backwards.
It's almost showtime.
So if I mute myself, I can't unmute myself. So don't mute myself, correct?
Well, Chris would have to unmute you, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
So basically, don't touch anything, right?
Right. I'll leave it alone.
Good morning, Katrina. Good. It's good to see you.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I have to share with you here in Jacksonville today. It's I don't know where everybody's located, but I know we have. It's a lovely day with 80s temperatures. So, it's one of those days where you're really grateful for, the opportunity to live someplace where you're not having to shovel snow.
Well, Chair Jolly, I'm in Denver where we had the largest snowstorm in history. And it's snowing right now, or, whatever. So I'm envious, needless to say.
And she's from California. Let's add that part in, okay?
Exactly.
So it's not like she's Wisconsin, Midwest. So that to me even makes it worse, right? When you're from a state where you don't get that level of snow.
Exactly.
Green on the other side, right? I grew up in Germany, and I really, really miss our seasons. And so I would love to have an occasional, little bit of a snowstorm, which of course, Florida is never going to happen. So,
Jolly, I'm sorry. Where did you say you grew up?
Germany.
Oh, so guten Tag, Frau. Wie
Danke
geht's?
sehr. Tag. Mir geht's sehr gut, danke.
Alles klar. This is the Arbeit. So I'm half Deutsch, half African American. So conversationally, yes, but my people were farmers, so not Hopdeutsch. I'm more pig farm. Well, that's what they were. We're pig farmers. So we're from Olesheim in Bavaria.
And Dr. Hodo, the other thing that that you come to realize is that in different countries you have some of the same dynamics that we have in the States. So, for example, in the language, the tempo is much more relaxed. So you have a little bit more of a drawl, if you can have German, right? As opposed to Northern Germany, where everything is a little bit more intense and faster paced. So the speech patterns are very reflective, of what you see in the United States.
Yeah. And my son, he didn't learn English until he was 5.
Wow.
So he didn't, so he came back, he had to learn though, because kids didn't want to play with him because he didn't speak English. So, and he's African American. So, when we lived there for 6 years, people were really confused about that when I would speak to them in Deutsch. So
Yeah, well,
they look at me and they make assumptions in America. So.
Well, my biological father was Iranian. So the first 9 years I lived in Tehran, in Iran, and this before the whole craziness over there in '79. And then we moved back to Germany, and then I moved to the States. So when I was in Iran, the German, they were kind of like, that had its issues. And then when I was in Germany, they thought of me because I spoke fluent Farsi. So then, at the whole, you're from a different place. And then I moved to the States. So there've been multiple progressions in terms of adjustment.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All right, well, we're going to get started.
Okay.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ida Blaylock. I'm the first vice president of COMTO Jacksonville. I'd like to welcome you to a virtual conversation with women leaders in transportation, shattering the glass ceiling. We have Ari Jolly, Deborah Johnson, and Adelie LeGrand, 3 outstanding women leaders in transportation. This discussion has been very much anticipated, and we are so excited that all of you are joining us today. 2 things. Please turn your cameras on if you can. We'd love to see your lovely faces. And if you have any questions for the panelists, please send them privately through chat to Mike Sandifer. Send it to Mike Sandifer if you have any questions for the panelists. Now I'd like to introduce COMTO Jacksonville's president, Christopher Macklin.
Thank you for the introduction, First Vice President Ida Blaylock. I want to welcome everybody again to our COMTO Jacksonville chapter virtual meeting. It is so great to see you all, and I hope that you all are well and safe at this time. First, I would like to acknowledge the Jacksonville chapter board, Ida, Donovan, Mike, and Dara. I'm so proud of the hard work that you all have done for COMTO, and especially the countless hours you invested to ensure that today's virtual meeting, which includes an amazing panel discussion that features extraordinary women leaders in the transportation industry. Today would not be possible without you. So thank you, COMTO Jacksonville Board. If you have joined us for the first time, I would like to briefly share with you the format of our meeting. The COMTO Jacksonville chapter holds monthly meetings comprised of multimodal transportation agencies such as air, highway, public transportation, rail, and water. The meeting presents a value extension to network with officials and connect you with small businesses to increase and diversify minority participation in current and upcoming bids. Also, our audience can gain insight and perspective of the guest speaker's particular field. Our guest speakers range from transportation and logistics services, professional services, small business program, opportunity, and a lot more. Today, we are recognizing the outstanding contribution of women who are leading and advancing American industry, transportation industry. Today, we welcome and are honored to have not only one, but three respected individuals in the transportation industry, and our captain, which is our moderator, Dr. Tammy, that will be leading today's discussion. I would like to formally welcome and thank our panelists, Madam Chairwoman Ari Jolly, Deborah Johnson, and Adelie LeGrand, for joining us today to share with us their improbable journey and current initiatives to elevate transportation to new heights. Now, I would like to introduce a leader in transportation industry that spans more than 4 decades. He's a champion of multimodal transportation. He was awarded the American Public Transportation Association, better known as APTA, for the Outstanding Public Transportation Management for 2020. It is a great honor and pleasure to introduce our CEO, Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford, are you there? All right. If he's not there at this moment, what I would do is I will continue the meeting, and once he joins, I will let him speak in regards to his kind words and valuable insight about the recognition of Women History Month, and thank him for joining us today. Now, I would like to reintroduce Ida Blaylock to introduce our moderator for today. Ida, are you there?
I think she needs to be unmuted as well as Mr. Ford needs to be unmuted.
Yes, Mr. Ford was trying to speak, but he needs to be unmuted, Chris, so he can speak.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, I think there we go. And so, Chris, thank you for that introduction. And please, 40 years makes me sound like a very old guy, but I'll accept that. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nat Ford, CEO of the JTA. And thank you again, Chris, for that introduction, and the COMTO Jacksonville chapter for giving me an opportunity to talk with you today and keep up the good work of advocating for minorities in our industry. Today, as you mentioned earlier, you've got a great group of panelists, including my board chairwoman, Ari Jolly, and she's just done a fantastic job over the last 90 days, assuming the chairmanship of our organization and helping lead us into the future. And so, and also Deborah Johnson, who is joining us from Denver. Good to see you, Deborah. And for those of you who may not be aware, Deborah and I work very closely together in San Francisco at the SFMTA. And I know she was working real hard then and has continued our career to develop into one of the promising CEOs in our industry. And then Adelie LeGrand, I know her very well. She's serving in Tampa at Hart, and she and I actually just grew up mere blocks away from each other from in Queens, New York. And so good to see both of you with your new positions and posts, and I know you'll serve your communities in our industry well, and congratulations. I think both cities are very lucky to have you. I'd like to also welcome today's moderator, Dr. Tammy Hudu, and I'm looking forward to this discussion and her moderating the panel. And I think everyone is aware that March is Women's History Month, and it's just a reminder of the great contributions that women have made and continue to make in this industry. And it's my hope that we continue to recognize women beyond the month of March, because they are clearly a huge part of the success we've experienced at the JTA. I mentioned earlier our chair, Ari Jolly, who will be on the panel. But, you know, it's clear that much like many minority populations in this nation, women were not given opportunities to lead as this country developed. But it's not the case today. In 2021, that's no longer the case, at least here at the JTA. When I arrived at the JTA a little over 8 years ago, I told our board of directors and the existing staff that I was going to model our senior leadership team and this agency after the diverse community we serve. And this included women, people of color, leaders who came from diverse backgrounds from the public transportation industry, and individuals who came from outside of our industry. And one of the most accomplished women in Jacksonville is our chair, Ari Jolly. The largest divisions, and I would like to point out, the largest divisions here at the JTA are actually led by women. Throughout our senior leadership and departmental ranks, you'll find women and people of color leading their respective areas. I think Bonnie Todd, I think I saw her on this call. She's our Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer, and she leads the majority of the JTA employees here, leading the Transit Operations Department and many of the frontline employees of our agency. Many of you should know Greer Gillis. She's been a COMTO member for quite some time in DC and now here in Jacksonville. Greer serves as our Vice President of System Development, leading a very robust construction, capital program and facilities team, and actually working hard right now to develop the strategic plan for the JTA going into this new normal post-pandemic era. Kelly O'Leary is our Vice President of Engagement. She ensures all of our employees have the support that they need from the JTA, as well as making sure our customers are properly cared for. And so there's a long list of executive women here at the JTA. I won't, I just named 3 of them to make sure that you recognize them during your day. And we also want to just recognize that the panelists you have today, Deborah and Adelaide, are leading some of the largest agencies in our nation during a time when our industry is experiencing monumental challenges due to this pandemic. As we embark on this new normal, as we go into the future, for their agencies as well as the JTA, we're all evaluating what we will need to do in terms of talent acquisition and being able to solve the complex problems and challenges of our communities. And I think all of us are going to be well served by their leadership. As it relates to the JTA, something that I need to share with you really quickly is you've probably read about our strategy to expand and extend the local option gas tax here in Jacksonville. Between the city of Jacksonville and the JTA, it will generate $1 billion in funding that will be able to support infrastructure and transportation projects over the next 30 years. And so you'll be hearing more about that initiative in the coming weeks. And actually, there's a press conference tomorrow. We are partnering with the city of Jacksonville and the mayor's office to conducting. So you'll hear a lot more about that going into the future. I would suggest for all of the members that are on this call, just listen and learn from today's panel. These women are not only leaders in their communities, but they are leaders who have been respected in this entire industry for quite some time. And so I'm very inspired by their work. I'm inspired by the work that our COMTO chapter is doing here in Jacksonville. And in recognition of that, this month, between March 22nd and the 27th, we will be lighting the Acosta Bridge purple in celebration of these fine women at the JTA in our community and nationally. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you again, Chris, and you and your officers and the members of this chapter are doing a fantastic job. And so let's get started with the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Ford, and thank you for your valuable insight about the recognition of Women History Month and joining us today. Now, I would like to reintroduce Ida Blaylock to introduce our moderator for today. Ida?
About our moderator, we have Dr. Tammy L. Hodo, who is the founder and president of All Things Diverse LLC, an educational consulting company working with organizations to optimize employee productivity through recognizing the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tammy earned her PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in urban studies with a minor in sociology, which she specializes in race, class, gender, and ethnicity. She is a TEDx Jacksonville speaker where she discussed the social implications of race. Dr. Tammy is also a service-connected disabled veteran of the U.S. Navy. Dr. Tammy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, Ida. Thank you so much for the introduction. Now, I have the honor to introduce our panelists, which I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a phenomenal program, just recognizing the power of women in the workplace and acknowledging the importance, of Women History Month. So I'll start with Miss Johnson, who is a person in the people business. She is a transportation executive guided by the knowledge that her decision making has direct bearing on the public's ability to make connections that benefit lives. Her public transportation journey began as a child in Fresno, California, and encompasses more than a quarter century of leadership experience honed at some of the largest transportation agencies in the U.S. in the San Francisco Bay Area, Washington, D.C., and Southern California. Ms. Johnson was selected as the general manager and CEO of RTD by the agency's board of directors on August 25th, 2020. She carries top responsibility for RDT's budget, capital projects, and service delivery, which include bus, light rail, and commuter rail options across the Denver metro area. Ms. Johnson holds a Master's of Arts degree in Public Administration from California State University, Hayward, which is now CSU East Bay, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations from the University of California, Davis. She is a proud alum of civic leadership programs in San Francisco and Long Beach, as well as the Eno Center for Transportation Executive Development Program. Thank you for being on the panel, Ms. Johnson. Ms. LeGrand is the Chief Executive Officer for the Hillsborough Area Regional Transportation Authority, HART. Created in October of 1979, HART is the regional mobility provider in Hillsborough County, serving a population of more than 1.4 million residents in the cities of Tampa, Temple, Terrace, and parts of unincorporated Hillsborough County, the fourth most populated county in Florida. HART's mission is to take people to places that enhance their lives. Prior to her position at HART, Ms. LeGrand was Vice President of Strategic Advisory for TransDev North America. She is passionate about utilizing mobility as a tool to create and sustain vibrant, equitable communities. Through contract agreements with TransDev North America, which is one of the largest providers of mobility solutions in the United States of America and abroad, Ms. LeGrand led the advancement of new mobility solutions for several transit agencies. Her motto is, "It is not about the project, it's about how the project improves the community." Thank you, Ms. LeGrand. Ms. Jolly is a senior assistant general counsel at Florida Blue and provides corporate development as well as board governance support related to the various Florida Blue subsidiaries and joint venture companies. Prior to joining Florida Blue and Blue Shield of Florida in '93, Ms. Jolly was an officer in the United States Navy from 1983 to 1990 and is a recipient of the Navy Achievement Medal. Ms. Jolly is a member of the Florida Bar and the Jacksonville Bar Association. She served as the chairwoman of the board of the Greater Jacksonville Area USO Services on the Fleet Landing Board and previously served as the chairperson of the Veterans Network and the Multicultural U.S. Forces. Ms. Jolly graduated from Jacksonville University and the Florida State University College of Law. She is also an honors graduate from the Naval Legal Justice School, which was in Newport, Rhode Island. She was appointed to the JTA board in 2015 by then Governor Rick Scott and reappointed in 2019 by our current governor, Ron DeSantis. So in this panel discussion, our guests will be discussing their journeys into leadership and discussions, and we will discuss what it takes to be a leader in today's day and age. So thank you and welcome all of these phenomenal panelists. We are really excited to have you on today. So we wanted to begin with the first question, and I guess we could do it in whatever order you all would like. But the initial question is, really, how did you kind of start in the transportation industry? And when I say that, I think about it being predominantly male dominated, and I think that's what most people think. But as women in these powerful positions, how did you initially begin your journey in this field of work? Miss Johnson, yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much. And first and foremost, I want to thank COMTO Jacksonville for the opportunity to be a part of this wonderful celebration and to be in the midst of these other phenomenal women on this panel. I greatly appreciate it because it's important to have our voices heard and be the change that you want to see. So with that, I'll delve into the question. Recognizing the transportation for all intents and purposes from my vantage point, we always see the frontline individuals within transit, and those are valuable positions because without them, there would be no need for me. But with that being said, I fell upon the transportation industry in the sense that I was on a trajectory to go to law school. And after having the opportunity to be admitted to a program called Council for Legal Educational Opportunity at what was Bolt Hall, which is now the University of California, Berkeley Law, I recognized going through that program as a first year would do, that I really was more focused on public policy and public administration. So interestingly enough, I happened to be dating a guy who was an engineering student at Cal, and I was changing my trajectory after I had graduated from undergrad. And in the course of that, I met his advisor who was leaving Cal Berkeley's engineering department to go work at an engineering-based consulting firm. And during this time in the Bay Area, we had just had a Loma Prieta earthquake. And I was able to get a job working for this firm in reference to being a spokesperson and doing the public awareness campaign for a major highway project in the greater Bay Area. And through that interaction with the Bay Bridge being out of commission and looking at the need to restart ferry service and interacting with a regional transportation provider that's known as BART, I was able to engage with a multitude of different transit agencies and met a myriad of different people. And I recognized that public transport is literally and figuratively the vehicle that brings the haves and have-nots together, meaning unleashing people from their limitations and getting to where they need to go when they want to get there, and basically providing access to higher education and jobs. And so through that opportunity, I in turn started working for the agency. I began to understand more about community relations and the importance of getting communities involved, and looking at my colleague Adelaide talking about the importance of a project changing the community. For those that have been to the Bay Area and probably have ridden BART from the airport into downtown San Francisco or Oakland, you can clearly see how that transforms. So with that as the backdrop, it enabled me to propel myself forward and leverage those opportunities and move around to ensure that I garnered greater bandwidth and have an understanding of multiple facets of public transport. So that's my quick and dirty story of how I fell into the transportation realm.
And I really like how you said, sometimes you just kind of fall into things, but you find it's your actual calling and something you're doing phenomenal at, right? I mean, or else you wouldn't have been elevated up into this position. So thank you so much. Ms. LeGrand, would you like to add any insight into that question of really how did you get started in the transportation industry?
Sure. I would say that a lot of what Deborah shared is definitely probably consistent with most people's careers, right? You start off, you have this idea as a young person that you're going to do, whatever. If it's starting off saying you're going to be a fireman or a police officer or a ballerina, and then you realize, okay, I have to pay bills and I may need to consider something else, right? So, for me, I went to school to be an engineer. I have an engineering degree, so it's a little different. I have an industrial engineering degree, which teaches you about process efficiencies. A lot of transportation classes are a part of the curriculum. So I guess I'm one of those, special people who kind of knew I wanted to be in this space, and just was lucky to find opportunities to continue to reinvent myself. And I think that's a little part of the story as well, right? So you graduate from school, again, as a young person, and you go into an office setting or into an agency, and the job that you do on that first day is not the job that you're doing 20 years plus later. And I think that's the beauty of being in public transportation, or just in transportation in general, because I know COMTO is not just focused on transit, but you know, for me, I worked in logistics. So I spent some time in logistics. I worked in manufacturing for the Ford plant. I've been to every Ford plant in North America, including Mexico and Canada. So I spent, you know, a good portion of my career on the logistics side, and then moved over to passenger transportation. Again, you know, you're able to reinvent yourself. You're able to use some of the same skill sets that you have in one mode and transition to another mode. And I think, you know, the one thing I would like to share with the audience today is you don't have to be limited in your opportunities, right? So if you're sitting someplace today and you're like, you know, I really want to try to do something else, you know, you can do that. You can really look at how you can utilize the skill sets and the experience that you have today and transfer that knowledge into another space. And that's really, to me, what makes this transportation feel so rich, because you can always find something new and exciting to do. If it's marketing, if it's communications, if it's engineering, if it's program management. I mean, I could go on and on and on and take up this whole call and listing all the opportunities you can touch on in transportation. So I definitely want folks to realize that you are not limited. There's so much you can do in this space. So thank you for the question.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We're going to move on to the second one because I definitely want to make sure that Ms. Jolly has an opportunity, and I know she will have an opportunity to participate in this question, because I recognize that when I think about everything we're talking about, right, Women's History Month and transportation, and Ms. Jolly is a practicing attorney, and I'm not sure how many of you all know, but of the attorneys, they're only 35% that are actually women. So there continues to be a disparity even within that field. So this question really applies to you all. You know, were there roadblocks that you found you hit due to your gender? And again, recognizing even in the legal field, right, that women only make up 35% of that profession. And then in transportation, as well, you know, just that often lack of representation in those positions of power. So were there any roadblocks that you experienced that you know were kind of based solely on probably those oversimplified stereotypes about women in transportation or law, or just in a professional setting, that you'd be willing to share with us?
Dr. Huda, that's my question.
Yes, it can be. Yes.
Okay. So, you know, let me start off by first thanking Christopher and the COMTO chapter for inviting me to participate. I'm really excited to be part of this panel. And, you know, the JTA, this role on the JTA has really afforded me an opportunity to just meet and a tremendous and diverse group of leaders. And that's been a real privilege and joy for me. You know, I'm glad you asked me that question, because much like Adley and Deborah, you know, my journey has been a little convoluted as well. You know, I started off with a vision to be a fighter pilot. That's what I wanted to be. And so when I was 16, I went ahead and soloed. You know, I was trying to continually position myself to be able to eventually be a fighter pilot. Graduated first in my class in RTC so that I could have all the credentials to be able to do that. And back in 1983, when I graduated from JU as a midshipman, went to Pensacola to start flight training, and there, you know, I became aware of that was, I think that was probably the first time I realized that there was such a thing as glass ceilings, because it became really evident at that time that there were in the military at that time, women were not allowed to engage in roles that involved combat. And so being a fighter pilot was not going to be an option for me. Women at the time were going to be either, you know, they were going to be in transport. You know, I could fly transport type planes, you know, or helicopters, but I could not engage in the combat arena, which in and of itself then presented, you know, limitations. And not being, I realized that I was not going to be able to engage fully, equally with my male counterparts. You know, I decided that I was going to pivot and try a role where I could have a more meaningful, impactful. Became a
Miss
lawyer.
Jolly. Oh, okay, there you go. I said we lost you for a moment. Sorry.
I became a lawyer, and so you know that to me has been in the span of 30 years. That's been one of those realizations where there was a field that had rules that precluded being able to be as meaningful a part as we could have been. In the military, obviously, is a very different place now. To the law, for example, when I started, the law firm that I started with did not have, there was a much greater percentage of male lawyers than there are female lawyers. Again, in the 30 years since I've graduated from law school, that has changed, and you see a much greater percentage of women being in the legal arena. But as you suggested, our percentages are still a little smaller, and that's because we lose a lot of women who become attorneys because the firm environments are such, the billable hour requirements are such that when you have to make choices, the work-life balance, a lot of women end up stepping out of the law because 2,200 billable hours a year is a little difficult to manage when you're also trying to raise children and deal with a family. So anyway, so those are some of the practical and statutory impediments. What really attracted me, I was given the opportunity to step onto the board of the JTA as a board member, was an industry that to me was much more reflective of what I saw in the military. I love the diversity in the transportation industry. I mean, from the moment I stepped onto the board and I looked at the management team that Mr. Ford had assembled, I realized that this was a very different environment. And as Mr. Ford alluded to, his management team is so diverse. Women in powers of authority, African American, Asian American. I love the management team that Mr. Ford had and continues to assemble. And as he suggested, it is very much representative of the community that we serve. In the microcosm of board work, being on a board, and I'm on 6 different boards, I see less impediments. I think there's a real onus now to make sure that boards are more diverse. I certainly see more women on boards. I think where boards of not-for-profits as well as for-profit companies still have more work to do is in making sure that diversity is more inclusive and that it does have more African American, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans. I think there's a certain amount of lift that still needs to happen in the when you're looking at board work.
Well, thank you so much, Miss Jolly, for your comments. So yeah, I was in a C2 squadron. So you could have flown the C2 because we go out to the carriers and you can catch that hook, right? So sorry, you all, that's Navy talk. But I love what Mr. Ford said too, though, and that's what I think as a diversity expert, right? And when I present, I tell people your workforce ideally should mirror the demographics of the city that you're in. So I think that's really important. And I just want to go ahead and ask any of our other panelists, were there roadblocks that you found that you hit just based solely on your gender? Ms. Johnson or Ms. LeGrand, either one of you want to answer that, and just the whole ideal maybe of the masculinity ideology, when it comes to transportation.
Yes, if I would most definitely like to lend a voice to this discussion here. Yes, it is roadblocks that I've encountered myself, because I think if anything, reflecting on what we talked about, the element of diversity, when I came up, which was in the early 90s in this space, there weren't individuals that looked like me. I could see them in the frontline ranks. However, being the only woman in the boardroom, and I say the boardroom because I did government relations, so I had an opportunity to engage with elected officials and members of the board, varying policy bodies. And when I tried to lean in to step into different positions, there were questions raised like, what could you bring to the table? Or did I grow up in operations? Because that was something that was very germane to the industry of yesteryear. recognizing that this industry spawned out as the transportation system started to grow after World War II. We're talking about the Army Corps of Engineers. So for all intents and purposes, you did not see women coming out of those institutions as you and Ms. Jolly were just referencing in reference to your naval careers, right? And so with that as the backdrop, being in that space, and the assumption was made, you know, that I had to be support staff, I couldn't be the department lead, or when I was leading a department, I can tell you more specifically, when I had gone on and I was serving as the chief operations officer at LA Metro, I remember being with two of my deputies and being out in one of our field facilities. And while I was introduced to an individual who was a woman, and it was said you need to meet her. When I walked over, she made the assumption that one of my subordinates was still the chief operations officer, because she had never seen anybody in that position. So it was hard for her, I think, to conceptualize that in this space and time that it was me that was there. But I will also say, in relationship to this, when we talk about it, I also think part of it rests with me, the sticky floor syndrome. For those of you who may not be aware of what that is, oftentimes we will second guess ourselves as women. When we look at a job description, we want to ensure that we have met all 20 aspects of those qualifications that are there, and not to disparage our gender counterparts being the male. They can see 3 or 4 and they're like, that job is for me. And so basically what we do is we hold ourselves to a higher standard in that regard, because we know we don't have the luxury of failure just by being in this space. And if anything, I was on a panel last week and I was sharing, and I need to take my own advice when I espouse this, it's get out of your head. If we don't believe in ourselves, who else will? So we have to believe it and achieve it and see yourselves in those opportunities. See yourself going after said opportunities to be in the various roles in which you need to see. Because for all intents and purposes, the reason why I personally believe it's hard for people to, see us in these spaces, it's just because we haven't been in these spaces. And as our illustrious Vice President Kamala Harris, and also my soror, I'm wearing my pink and green today, said in Adelaide, shout out to her as well as my fellow panelists and soror, but we may be the first, because I am the first woman to sit in the seat in the 52 plus years of this organization, but I am not going to be the last. And I feel it's incumbent upon me to reach back and pull somebody up with me. And if I'm not doing that to create the environment which is reflective of our community and our society, then shame on me. So I would say in sum, get out of your own head, lean in, embrace that moment, because we're our own worst critics. So believe in yourself, because you got to believe it to achieve it. So thank you.
Ms. Johnson, that was just amazing. So in sociology, we often talk about the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Where we get in these positions, right? And we begin to doubt ourselves because we're women. And then when we add in a little spice of the beautiful melanin, right? Then we really begin to just have this imposter syndrome. Am I in the right space? Am I qualified to do this? So everything you hit on is so important. And very relevant. And Ms. LeGrand, I wanted to give you an opportunity if you would like to dive in, and if you had any obstacles that you felt were really, had to do with your gender.
So I have a little different response, but it would just give you a glimpse into, what makes me me. So I'm one of those people who is a consummate glass half full person. And there were probably a lot of obstacles, and I did not recognize them as such until afterwards, right? So if my husband was on this call, he would say, Adelie, you didn't realize that was going on? I was like, no, I had no idea. So for me, I've just been one of those people where I just constantly grinding, and I have my head down, and I'm like, okay, I need to do this, this, this. And if it doesn't work here, I'm going to find another way to get it done. And I think it kind of connects to what Deborah said, right? You can't stop. If you believe you can achieve something, you just have to keep moving forward and making it happen. And for me, I don't know if it's naivete, but I just never really looked at a situation as one that would prohibit me from getting where I wanted to go. And I know it sounds super simplistic, and I want, the participants to understand what I'm saying. It's not that it wasn't difficult, right? And it's not that I didn't have challenges, but I didn't see them as challenges or difficulties that I could not overcome. right? I didn't feel like it was something where I needed someone to fly down and kind of scoop me up and save the day. It was more of, okay, how do I better learn the politics? Or how do I build relationships with others? You know, I see Bob Prince on the call, and he knows, you know, I was one of the new people that started at a firm where he was working. I didn't know him. I looked on the directory online, literally my first week, I looked at the directory and I was like, oh my God, there's a Black guy who works at this firm. I'm going to email him and introduce myself. And that's exactly what I did. I introduced myself via email. I work here. I just started, would love to engage. And you know, those are the things that I did. I kind of reached out. He was a great guy. He could have been horrible and like, lady, don't reach out to me, but he wasn't, right? And I was able to even come to his office in Boston, and so he sat me down and he gave me some tips on how to navigate the organization. So yes, there were challenges, and yes, there were days when I was like, what am I doing? But it never ended with me saying, I can't achieve what I want here, right? So, you know, I would say a different perspective, but that's just the way my journey has been.
Yeah, but I like what you talked about though, when, you know, I'm kind of that glass half full too, right? So after the fact, then I begin to think about, oh my gosh, I can't believe I overcame that. Now, Mr. Prince is phenomenal, and I would have probably done the same thing and just reach out. But you both, you and Miss Johnson, as well as Miss Jolly, kind of bring me to the next question, right? When we think about that, and we think, so Mr. Prince was able to kind of mentor you in a sense, right, and let you know how to navigate within that, you know, space. And that's really the question: is, did you have a mentor? You know, and think about this. So did you have a mentor to make it to where you are now? And as Miss Johnson said, are you reaching back now and are you mentoring others? Because we don't want you, while you may be the first, we surely don't want you to be the last in these positions of power. So, you know, to anyone, did you have a mentor, and are you now actively mentoring others? So that they would be able to kind of move along, you know, in this process like you've been able to.
So I'll jump in and I'll say, you know, no, I can't say I had a mentor. But what I can say is that I looked at different people who were around me, and I built relationships, and I was able to glean what I needed from those various relationships. So what does that mean specifically? You know, one of your questions was, were there any barriers? And I think in some organizations, when they have, you know, these organizationally defined mentorship opportunities, it just seems in some cases that a certain group of people get to have a formal mentor. And if you go through this pathway, then you know you're going to get to the next level. And I think for those of us who don't fit in the typical box, you know, you have to be able to see how you can learn from everybody who's around you. Even the person who might be the worst supervisor or boss that you've ever had. And I've had some of those, but I've learned a lot of things from those people as well. And don't limit yourself, at least for me, in my experience. You know, was it not about limiting myself or having to have someone who has defined themselves as my mentor, but again, being able to have, you know, as again, quoting Mr. Prince, a kitchen cabinet of folks that I know will tell me the truth and will keep me on the straight and narrow. And if I, you know, if my back is up against the wall and it relates to this topic, this is the person I call. You know, the other thing I would say is typically there's not one person who can provide you with answers to all the challenges you're going to find. So if you're limiting yourself to like one mentor, at least again, in my experience, that might not really be what you need, right? So for me, working in an engineering field, where primarily the people I work for most of my career were white men who probably never really engaged with a Black woman at the level that they were engaging with me, you know, having mentors who weren't white men weren't going to really help me, because I needed someone who could help me to engage with people like themselves so that I could matriculate in my organization. So were they going to actually mentor me? Probably not. But were there people who I had relationships with that could help me overcome certain issues? Yes, I had lots of those folks. So I would just say that, you know, it's great if you can find a mentor, but also open your mind to, you know, seeing where there are people who are willing to help you, willing to talk to you, willing to give you the guidance that you need so you can get to the areas or the levels that you're aspiring toward.
And thank you. That was a great answer. And that makes me think of like emotional intelligence and just being self-aware, self-regulating, having multiple people that you can go to who are specialized in different areas, but that will be transparent with you, you know, about things that you're doing, and that you're willing to take that feedback and know that it's meant for good, just for your own personal growth. And I think that's something we all have to be open to, in order to be, you know, aware and self-regulating, and to create that journey of growth within us. Ms. Johnson, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I gotta say, Adelaide hit the nail on the head, and it's really interesting in that regard, because having been in these spaces where there are mentorship programs, and those are by design, but then you have the others that are just organic. And growing up in this industry, by ensuring that I had a seat at the table, and you know, with Nat being on the call, I can remember when we were in San Francisco, and one thing he said to me, you know, when I was acting in his stead and I went over to meet with now the governor of California, who was the mayor, he's like, don't sit around the perimeter of the room, sit at the table, you're there representing me. And we have to sit at the table and lean in. And with Bob Prince being on the call, I remember back in 2008 when he came to speak to our Eno class, talking about the kitchen cabinet. That's something I pay forward each and every time when I have that conversation, because I think it's incumbent upon us, and for our own personal success, that we embrace that and have different dialogues with a myriad of different people. And I can tell you, going through this sort of jungle gym acceleration relative to where I am, recognizing that it's not a clear ascension. Sometimes you have to step to the left, step to the right, step to the back in order to go forward. Having an opportunity to engage with a myriad of folks that have been in that seat, that could lend you a kind word and some support, and basically just be in a place whereby you can feel as if you can vent and share. And I'll share this as relates to Adelaide and I. Years ago, after the APTA conference in LA, we had gotten together a group of women, and we called ourselves Women Empowered. And I got to tell you, in that group of women that were sitting at Harold's and Bell's in LA, eating some fried chicken after we had sat in traffic for 2 hours trying to get there from downtown LA, out of that group of women, let's see who was there. We have Adelaide, who is leading Heart. We have Kimberly Slaughter, who is leading Sistra. You have me. We had, oh my God, I'm forgetting.
India Birdsong.
We had India Birdsong that was there, who is now leaving Cleveland, right? And so the point of the matter is, when we got together, and we're still, and there's some more women on a email thread that we have. I have another group when I went into LA Metro, recognizing I thought I was the only woman on the 25th floor. I developed a group and I called ourselves SAM, Sisters in Metro. And out of that group, there's one of the women who's leading MetroLink in Southern California. So the point of the matter is just having that ability to have this group. And I'd be remiss not to reflect on those individuals that have always propped us up. You know, the Queen of Transit, we have Ms. Shirley DeLibero, we have Dr. Beverly Scott, who is always lend an ear. You can reach out and call. There's Nuria Fernandez. And I don't want to start naming people because inevitably I'll forget someone, but it's just been this innate group of individuals that I will frame as our tramily, our transit family, who has been there in each and every instance to say, add a girl or add a boy, and was like, I'm here if you need me, because I know this is a daunting experience in some regards. There's going to be some highs and some lows, but for me, I feel it's imperative that I share my experiences and talk through with people that are on this trajectory and people that are in a space faced with some adverse challenges. And more specifically, as we look at the cultural consciousness that has plagued this country, I think for me, what I've talked with my team about as of late is we have to bring our whole selves to work, but I'd be remiss not to say what I'm struggling with when I see people that look like me being adversely impacted because of the melanin that they have in their skin, or for our Asian brothers and sisters with that horrific tragedy that happened yesterday. If we don't talk about that as leaders, then we're doing a disservice expecting our people to come in and present a PowerPoint that they've worked on, not realizing that something else is plaguing them. So that's my long-winded answer in reference to mentoring. It's basically leaning in, recognizing that we're all people in the people business, and the ultimate and simplistic way in which to do that is that we all have stories, and we need to keep in mind that we need to be kind.
And Miss Johnson, I just love that just segued into just so many other things, right? I mean, and as you said, oftentimes I've seen where leaders have not addressed the whole person and not recognized, like we see a lot of civil unrest surrounding this social construct of race, right? Race isn't even biologically real, but it has severe implications, right? And recognizing xenophobia, what we see happening in our Asian community, because of sound bites that were very derogatory regarding COVID. And we think about sexism and comments, derogatory comments made about women, and the hypersexualization of Black and brown bodies, and it's just so many things. But we, as you said, as leaders, need to recognize that when we come into the workforce, because your employees, while you may not talk about it, it's impacting them. That toll internally is going to impact them, and if you don't acknowledge it, it's going to impact their productivity rates. It's going to impact their ability to collaborate with their colleagues, to have that civil discourse and understanding and really empathy, right? I mean, and I think that is so important. Well, let me ask you all this. What advice would you give to women who are looking to enter the transportation field? What is some advice that you would be able to offer them?
May I jump in on the last question for just 2 seconds?
Oh, yes, Miss Jolly, please.
No, I think probably on how to enter the transportation field, that Adelaide and Deborah are probably much more qualified from an operational perspective to speak to that. But on the mentor thing, the one thing that I just wanted to share is that several thoughts actually, and I think Adelaide probably alluded to this, but effective mentors, I have found at least effective mentors don't necessarily always look like you. I've found that, some of my most effective mentors weren't, women, but, at the time that I was, either in the military or entering the legal profession, I found that some of my most effective mentors were, either men or, white men or African American men, or or others that I that took the time to share with me sort of some challenges in politics, that I could not be aware of. And so, my husband being one of them, he, I remember, some of my initial struggles in not being necessarily part of the boys club. And he said to me, the reality is that they see a petite blonde woman and they may not take you serious, but they will act at their peril by not taking you serious. If they don't think you are a powerful force to be reckoned with, when the time comes, you will blindside them with what you have to bring to the table. And so there were pearls of wisdom that I gained from mentors that were unlikely mentors. And likewise, there were people that looked like me. I remember one of the female wanted to basically, she thought the most effective way to be a female, to be an officer, was to basically become a male proxy, if you will. And to me, that was sort of was kind of ill-placed logic. The whole purpose of I was there with all of the strength and the attributes that my femininity brings to the table, that being a woman brings to the table. So, sometimes the people who look like you don't necessarily are the people with the greatest pearls of wisdom. But I think what my experience has taught me is that we really, as Adelaide suggested, you've got to look around yourself and you've got to identify people that are leaders, and that have the kindness to want to share with you, what the most effective ways to overcome challenges and to be able to make a difference, in whatever profession you're in. So look for those opportunities, look for mentors who are willing to give of their time and their insights, I think. So I just wanted to add that.
And those, thank you, Miss Jolly. Those are very valid. Oftentimes we, cross-cultural mentorship does work. It depends if that person has that your best interests at heart. And I think we would be remiss not to distinguish between mentorship and sponsorship. So mentorship are those people who are assisting us on the way, giving us the insight and tidbits. But ideally, we also want that sponsorship, someone who's in that C-suite, in that space that we're not in, that when conversations of promotion or accolades come up, that they're mentioning you. And they're saying, oh my gosh, have you looked at Miss Jolly or Miss Johnson or Miss LeGrand and just seen like these tremendous things that they've done? So kind of dropping your name in places, oftentimes that we may not be. Right. And so we need to make sure we understand that difference between mentorship and sponsorship, because sponsorship is so important as well. So I did want to go ahead and ask that question. So what advice would you give to women who are looking to enter the transportation field? Is it a particular degree? Is there a fellowship or some type of program to help women get to where you are?
I think there's an abundance of opportunity. And when we talk about entering the transportation field, it really gets back to what Adelaide said with the response to the first question, recognizing that there is a myriad of opportunities within the transportation space. And just when I fell into this industry, recognizing I may not have been cognizant of the fact at the time, but I mean, you could be a contract administrator, you could be in materials management, with procurement, you can be an attorney. You can be a labor negotiator. You can be, an engineer. You can be in charge of facilities. So it runs the gamut. So in relationship to what it is, I think what we should do collectively, if one is thinking about entering the transportation space, it's more or less do an internship or something of the like to orient yourself and acclimate yourself. Because when I first entered this space, like I said, with my background, it was all about government relations and advocacy. And what propelled me to go forward was my innate my innate sort of learning aptitude relative. If I'm going to write a report to Congress, I need to understand what this is doing for the agency. So when I'm looking at a rail car and I'm talking about we need money for a grant, what does that mean to the overarching operation of the transit system for which I'm working? So that enabled me to go over and speak with people, right? And I think it's incumbent upon us to lean into the situation and educate ourselves and don't be frightened of that. I recall at one of my former agencies when I was serving as the deputy CEO, I had an individual leading government relations, and I said, "Have you ever been to a bid, meaning when the operators pick their shifts?" She had never been before, and I'm like, "How can you advocate, for these different programs if you don't understand the core business of the transit agency at hand? Have you ever gone to a morning pullout to see our frontline men and women who are the faces of our organizations for all intents and purposes, understanding what they do with a pre-check, right?" And so a pre-check being what you do to make sure your vehicle that you're pulling out is in a state of good repair, available for service. And so with that all being said, I think we have to recognize that there's interdependencies from each of those varying job functions that makes the transportation industry, because it's a very analogous to a puzzle piece. While there may be different sizes of the jigsaw puzzle, if in fact not every puzzle piece is in place, you will never have that box top cover photograph materialize. So with that, it's incumbent for us to all educate and inform and let people know about the opportunities within transportation. I think COMTO does a great job with that, with the city intern program. We have the emerging leaders program. And so when we are going out and having these different events, it's reaching out to the high schools, it's reaching out to those matriculating at the undergraduate level and graduate school level and say, "Hey, have you thought about transportation?" So that's what I would lend to this discussion in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just add that, specifically if we're focused on talking to women about coming into the transit or transportation space, I would say that, if we focus on transit, as Deborah stated, there are a lot of jobs, and there are also, some of the bargaining positions You know, you could be a bus washer, you could be a bus operator, you could be a motorman, you could be a mechanic. And a lot of these jobs, depending on your educational background, you can go to a community college for 2 years and be certified to do some of these jobs. You can get a CDL license and be able to drive a bus. Even without a CDL in some environments, you can drive a paratransit van. So, you know, if you're a single mom and you're trying to figure out a way to make more money or to have benefits that you can use to provide health care for your kids and, you know, start to save money for retirement, you know, transit is a good way for you to get into the workforce and having some of those wraparound protective, you know, benefits. And as you get in, you can also advance. As Deborah said, most transit agencies, you know, they give you tuition reimbursement. So you can decide, hey, I started off as a bus washer and I'm seeing these mechanics. I want to learn how to, you know, work on the vehicles. And you can take some courses and you can, you know, move through the organization. So I would just say, you know, sometimes we don't look at it through the lens of where people may be in their personal lives and, you know, the services that they really require in order to have a better quality of life. And I think especially, you know, and I'm not saying that men don't have these same needs as well, right? But the question is focused on women. And a lot of times they have the, I won't say the burden. I have 4 kids, my kids are not a burden, but you have the responsibility to make sure that you are, you know, taking care of your household, your children, maybe you have elderly parents, whatever the situation is. Transit gives you the opportunity to be able to provide for your family and your personal space as you grow professionally. So at the end, you're able to do both, right? And you feel like a better person because you know you're contributing more to your family, your community, and your own personal growth. And the last thing I would say is that being in a space where you know you're respected and that you know there are other people who have gone through a similar journey, it makes it worthwhile. You know, one of the other questions, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be horrible days, right? There are going to be lots of people who call out because it's spring break and they just all decide that they don't want to come into work, right? You have to figure out how you keep going and keep service on the street. But if you know at the end of the day, you're with a team of people who respect you and they understand what you're sacrificing to keep things going, that's what makes it all, you know, worth it at the end. And I think women should know that transit is a space where you can feel like you're a part of a good team, that you're going to be respected and you can grow and flourish here.
Well, thank you for that. So I do have to say, you mentioned a couple things. So you talked about what we call the second shift, right? Women, we tend to be responsible, you know, when we're finished working, we go home to that second job, right? Taking care of the kids, the house and everything. And then also you even talked about, you know, oftentimes taking care of our elderly parents, which we call the sandwich generation, right? We still have kids at home, but then we also have our parents that are getting older that we need to see about as well. So I just want to share. So I'm sure you all have heard like a PK kid. I'm not a preacher's kid. I'm not a teacher's kid, but my father retired from Milwaukee County Public Transportation and he was a bus driver for 32 years. So I know how important transportation is and the benefits. So I appreciated that when I needed braces, and good medical care. So I was able to get that. So this question is much more inclusive of all the panelists. So we know that we have a lot to learn, right, about public transportation from other cities across the nation. Now that you're a CEO, Ms. Johnson, and Ms. LeGrand, and Ms. Jolly as the board chair, what are some of your agency or board initiatives, let's say like the first 90 days up to a year? And Ms. Jolly, if you wanted to start us out, you know, as the board chair, like what were some of those first initiatives when you looked at it and, you know, how far out have you planned? And then we can go on to the other ladies. Oh, we got that one little split. There we go.
Okay, yeah, I know sometimes it freezes up a little. So some of these initiatives were planned and then some of them, you know, have been on the books. You know, one of the initiatives that was not planned, you know, was our response to vaccination and how do we get those I loved what Mr. Ford said. Availability is not the same thing as access, right? And so very early on, Mr. Ford and his management team, and I have to give a huge shout out to Bonnie Todd and Greer Gillis. They and the rest of the management team. They sat down and they put together a plan that was the sole purpose of which was, how do we get those members of our community that are least able to take advantage of the vaccination to vaccination sites. So the people without cars or the aged or the disabled, how do we make sure that just because we have the vaccine, we get those folks to the vaccination sites. And so they got together and they and one of our initiatives going into the first part of this year was a plan to make sure that our bus routes and our other modes of service, like our Ready Ride, was utilized in a way to maximize the opportunity of the underserved community to get to those vaccination sites. And so that has been one of our major initiatives, and it continues to be one of our major initiatives going forward. In addition to that, as you may know, I prefer to think that we are one of the leaders in the autonomous vehicle space, and we continue to look at rolling out, converting our Skyway into an autonomous vehicle transportation mode. And then, we are acting on that firstly right out of the bat with what we call the Bay Street Innovation, where we're going to be employing autonomous vehicles up and down, basically downtown Jacksonville. And so that's a major initiative that we're working on. This is not, this is to me every bit as important from a diversity and inclusion perspective. One of the things that I just love at the JTA and that Mr. Ford and his management team are so good about doing is reaching out into the community, into the schools, to put the face of diversity and the opportunities that transportation provides in front of school children, and also to invite the school children and others into our facilities. I think about Bernard Schmidt, who's the head of our automation and innovation division, and his team, who regularly bring school kids into the automation and innovation facility to show them all of the work that's going on in this very innovative space. Think about the female, the young woman, the young African American student, the young Asian student, the Hispanic student, for whom, who suddenly see an industry where there are so many fascinating options that they could pursue as a career, that they may never have thought about, because everybody's talking about architecture, medicine, MBAs, law school, but here's an industry that it is constantly evolving. It is meeting, it is such a powerful tool to help communities survive and thrive. And so, I love the fact that we have the opportunity to continue to reach out into the community and have them look at transportation not only as a viable career option, but also as an industry that truly breeds and bleeds diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, and I mean, in thinking about Jacksonville, knowing that it's the largest landmass of any city in the U.S., we know transportation, right, is imperative because often, lower income, owning a vehicle is just not an option. So that transportation, as you said, I mean, it's imperative, and that's going to help get people to their jobs, get people to the sites to get vaccinated, to have access to a variety of services that if it were not for transportation, they would not be able to access. I mean, I'm from a major city, Milwaukee, and we rode the bus. I rode the bus. It was actually easier to ride the bus than to own a vehicle because when it comes to parking and things of that nature, you just don't have to worry about it, and the bus is on a regular schedule. So I do want to turn it over to either Ms. Johnson or LeGrand. And basically, same question. Now that you're CEO, what are some of your agency initiatives that you're implementing?
So I can jump in. So I'm still, within my first 90 days. So for me, I am really just trying to get the lay of the land. And what I shared in my 90-day plan was really to focus on listening to our community. And when I say community, I mean community with a big C. So our internal community, that's, you know, the staff, our team, and then our external community, which are our partners, the MPO, the other transit agencies in the region, and then our customers. And those are customers who actually ride our service, as well as people who have never ridden transit in their lives, but I see them as potential future customers. And it's really to learn from them, you know, what is it that they, one, think transit should do for the community? How do they see themselves in the services that we provide? How do they see themselves within the organization? Do they understand the mission? Do they have some ideas and concepts that they think we need to elevate? And I've been doing this listening tour for the last 70 days and learning a whole lot. And what I can say is, and Miss Jolly, you touched on this, you know, when you talked about equity, equity is a real thing, you know, and I think that sometimes it gets the lip service because it's like the cool word to say right now. But, you know, there are inequities internally in organizations between the bargaining and non-bargaining employees. And there's this friction, right? If it's, you know, one that's overt or covert, but it's there. And to have an environment where folks understand that everyone is going to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of your classification, is important. So that's, you know, I would say the primary thing that I've heard internally. Externally in the community, it's the same thing. It's the equity based on where you live. If you live further away from the core, you feel like the type of service you receive is not the same service that's provided to people who live within the core. And again, I think it's education and communication that, you know, it's not a one size fits all type of solution, and having that conversation so people have a better understanding of the level of, you know, coverage and support that they should expect to receive. And then making sure that we, you know, hold true to what we're saying we're going to offer. And then to our community, you know, our partner community, you know, how can we really partner? Is it partnership with a lowercase p or partnership with a capital P? And I say the capital P has dollars associated with it, right? So I want capital P partnerships where people are sitting at the table and they're finding opportunities where we can leverage dollars that we have collectively to advance the you know, implementation of projects or to really supplement other projects. So for example, if the Housing Authority has a huge development that is in the process of being constructed, let's talk right now about how we can add a great station at your facility, or how we can get funding to increase service to meet the demand of your new development. So those would be like the capital P partnerships. So for me, within my first 90 days, those are the things I'm working on. You know, if I'm fortunate enough to get invited to come back again next year, I'm sure I have a lot more to share with you.
So if I can just, before Ms. Johnson chimes in, so I do want to say, as a diversity expert, I think it's imperative that people understand equity and equality are not the same, but people tend to use those terms interchangeably. Equality is assuming we're all starting at the same vantage point, which reality is we know we're not. You know, systemically as a society, we've had major issues and we continue to see those play out. But equity is basically removing those systemic barriers in order to create an equitable opportunity for everyone, recognizing that we're starting at different places because of historical institutional policies and practices that have impeded, right, the capabilities of some communities to be as engaged or to develop as far as others have. So I think that's really important. And another thing I wanted to talk, just to briefly say, like, as an urban sociologist, when you live in the urban core, it's more expensive, you know, and especially if we think about gentrification, and we see that taking place, right, where people are now being priced out of the neighborhoods that their families have lived in for generations, even though they've owned their homes outright, but now they can't afford the property taxes because of gentrification. So all these are just so relevant and important conversations to have within the transportation industry. And I love the ideal of, if you're developing a housing division, let's go ahead and talk now so we can figure out, particularly if it's mixed income or low income, how we can assist you in creating a space, you know, where they're going to have transportation to be able to get to their jobs, to get the vaccine, to go grocery shopping, you know, all of those things. So I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, I didn't mean to take away from you. I just always have to add my little sound bites. So, same question to you, Ms. Johnson. Looking at it now as the CEO, what are some of your agency initiatives, like, beginning your first 90 days up to a year in?
All right, well, thank you so much for the question. I'm gonna circle back to what you just said because it's been interwoven into what I'm doing right now in the course of my first 100 days, recognizing that I just came on board in November. So I'm sort of aligned with Adelaide in relationship to what I'm actually doing, recognizing that the agency have had some initiatives, but are those really reflective of what we need to do holistically? So coming into the organization, I had a plan as well, recognizing that when you see one transit agency, you've seen one transit agency, and recognizing that I have been in this space for 29 years, I was new to the Denver metropolitan area. So I needed to acclimate myself to the geographic landscape and the culture, both internal to the organization and external to the organization. So what I did specifically is I basically had listening sessions whereby I outlined 5 questions in which I ask everyone the same thing. And when I say everyone, that's encompassing a myriad of different demographic segments. I'm talking about individuals ranging from my leadership team to employees throughout the organization. It consisted of me going out at 4 a.m. my first day to the various divisions because I thought it was important for me to meet the people, the men and women that run the organization before I did some media blitz. And so by doing that and by writing the system and in turn meeting with a plethora of individuals, including the governor, the chairs of our General Assembly's Transportation Committee, meeting the congressional delegation, asking and probing a little bit about what is it that we can do to bridge the gap as relates to communication. Because what I learned on my listening tour is that RTD has been known as the agency of no. And I come from the space, you don't have to be disagreeable when you disagree. And why are we the agency of no? Recognizing that we may be the big kahuna in this geographic region, but we don't understand what we don't understand. So I needed to take it upon myself to educate myself about what it is that I didn't know. And so with that, having forged this listening tour, and I can tell you in my short period of time, I have had close to 500 meetings, and I'm not being facetious when I utilize that number. And some of the recurring themes I heard is that we have great people, we don't engage with the community, we go out and tell them what we're going to do, and recognizing that this is a large geographic district in which we serve, that oftentimes people, when I say people, the people that make up the organization, we as the people in the people business felt like they could engage with the people that utilize the system. So with all of that, what I've done is I am embarking upon an effort, because what I have learned is while we have a mission statement, the mission statement is not a mission statement. It doesn't talk about what we do. And our vision is not really there in reference to being aspirational. So from all this engagement, I learned that we need to be aligned on what our North Star is. We need to create alignment. And in order to do that, you have to bring people in and understand from a design thinking pain point. For those of you who are familiar, you have to empathize with the end users' pain points. Understanding those pain points, then you could actually define what the problem is you're trying to solve for. And then you go into the ideation phase, right? And then you go into prototyping, whatever that is, to solve what those pain points are, and then pilot that. So recognizing I am working in earnest to get everyone to rally around that, in the process of working in tandem with my board to establish a strategic planning process, recognizing that they're the policymakers and me as the leader of the organization have to create alignment with my team to ensure we're bringing those things to fruition. So having that as the foundation, what are we aspiring to do? There's all these things about reducing the carbon footprint. Yes, we have electrified vehicles. We have 36, we're about to get some more. But really, what does that mean holistically? What are we trying to solve for? And those are the types of elements I need us to think back about, recognizing that we're quick to say we were first in the country to do this, that, and the other, but to what extent are we first? To what benefit are we providing to the communities at large? How are we basically enhancing the quality of life? So those are the things that I'm working on quite naturally as we talk about vaccinations. That's imperative, but recognizing that I need to holistically look at our road to recovery, recognizing that public transportation has been an economic engine that has been constant throughout this entire pandemic that has spanned more than a year. It's focusing on those elements before we start talking about, hey, let's expand and build more of our projects, because I'm focused on right now is here I am in a house that may have a dilapidated roof and the plumbing may not be where it should be, but I want to add on an extra room. I'd be remiss not to focus on the core foundation first and then bring us full speed ahead as we go forward. So like Adelaide, bring me back in a year and I'll tell you what we've done.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So I've enjoyed this conversation, but I do want to go ahead and take the time to turn it back over to Chris to see if we have any questions, any comments. This has just been very educational for me, insightful, and I've definitely enjoyed myself. So Chris?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to quickly introduce Mike Sandifer. He's the treasurer of the COMTO Jacksonville chapter. He was compiling the question. I believe there's one particular question that he would like to share with the audience. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chris, so much. And thank you, four phenomenal women, for this phenomenal presentation today. We were so excited to hear your message. Ms. LeGrand, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Jolly, and also Dr. Hodo. We really appreciate you from the Jacksonville COMTO chapter. We had several questions, but because of the sake of time, I want to actually narrow it down to one question. I'm going to read the question right now. And it's for each panel, and if you could kind of keep it to under maybe 30 seconds, if possible. What more can you do in your role to help achieve the company's goal or agency goal? Ms. Johnson, Ms. LeGrand, or Ms. Jolly?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the
No
latter
problem.
part.
No problem. What more can you do in your role as CEO or president to help achieve the company's goal or agency's goal?
Well, I'll take that really quickly. And you said 30 seconds. Well, I said in my last response that I'm working on creating strategic alignment around what our mission and vision are in our, leadership competencies and values. But basically our core business is moving people, because we're people in the people business. So how do we do that effectively? And in order to achieve that, we need to go where the people are to ascertain what their pain points are, as opposed to sitting in an office and modeling what we think it is that they need. So basically, we'd be remiss not to engage with those individuals that are most in need to ascertain what it is they need to do to get to where they need to go when they need to get there. So in order to do that, I have to lean into those discussions, work with a myriad of different stakeholders, not expecting people to come to me, and go out in the field myself and engage, because I need to hear things firsthand and not have it filtered by others, so I basically can garner a better understanding of what it is that I should do as the leader of this organization.
Thank you. Ms. Jolly?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, for as a chair of a board, maybe it's a little different for me, but I think, it is really incumbent on me and the rest of the board to be fully engaged, to help the JTA and the management team, to provide that strategic oversight and direction setting, so that, the critical initiatives that we have outlined, not only for the immediate future, but long range, are actualized. So I think, we have to understand what are our priorities, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and then collectively and individually be there to support the agency.
Ms. LeGrand?
So I would say, again, I support both Ms. Jolly and Ms. Johnson's responses. And I would add that elevating and strengthening the brand, I would say, is important. We're in a space, public transit, where we rely on dollars primarily from folks who do not use our services, right? So if it's sales tax dollars or ad valorem dollars, the vast majority of the folks are not people who use our service. So if we don't elevate the brand and get people to understand the value of our public transit agencies in the community, it's more difficult for us to engage and continue to get the support from that capital P partnership with dollars associated with it, so we can expand the service. So for me, adding on to what the other two women stated is really elevating and strengthening the brand of the services that we provide.
Thank you, ladies. And finally, I want to thank again Dr. Tammy Hodo, who's actually has always been a true partner for COMTO Jacksonville. And I believe this is our third or fourth time actually helping us moderating a program for us. So we would like to ask everyone that's listening now, if you could, please go to All Things Diverse and give her a review. The board will give her a review today, but we actually, the committee members, as well as anybody that's listening today, give her a review, because I'm a small business owner also, and Google reviews helps the business to actually grow. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Chris. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mike. To everyone that joined the call today, I truly believe, and I am sure everyone on the call will agree, that today's virtual conversation was needed, and we all can admit that we take what we heard today can actually help us in our personal and our professional lives. Deborah Johnson, you shared some great things. One particular was like your roadblock, some of the things you encountered in the 90s, and how you was asked, did you grow up in the transportation industry, and they wanted you to be a support staff and not really in a leadership role, but you didn't accept that. You mentioned women tends to second guess themselves, and what women need to do is get out of their heads and see yourself in that role and believe in yourself. Miss Adelie LeGrand, I can recall your comment that will stick with me for quite some time now. You said that don't settle. You also said you can always find something new to do in transportation industry, and don't be limited. And as well as Madam Ari Jolly, you talked about how you started to be a fire pilot and graduated first in the ROTC, and the adversity that you face in the military, and how you was able to overcome anti-feminism by working your way up and believing in yourself. And it would be a great idea to have a mentor that is in your best interest. I really enjoyed this conversation. So to the panel and to our moderator, thank you again. And to our guests and to our COMTO members, I see so many leaders on this call from all aspects of transportation, and also to the other chapters from across the nation that is currently on the call. Thank you for joining us. The Jacksonville chapter really, really appreciate everybody's support. We're actually coming to the end of this meeting. So on behalf of the COMTO Jacksonville board, we appreciate your support, and we will see you next month on April 21st at 11:30 a.m. Please tune in. We will be having the Duval County first elected Black female judge, Ms. Rhonda Peoples Waters. She will be speaking about mentorship styles, transportation, and most important things that helped her to become a judge, and some of the top 5 legal issues in Florida. So enjoy. We'll see you later, and thank you, and have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.